She woke to screams, soldiers pounding on doors, fires burning in distant halls, but she stayed in bed, calm, silent, watching, smiling. The empire trembled around her, but she had learned something early. Chaos is nothing if you control your own mind. Her father ruled with iron. Commands were law, affection rare. Her mother was fragile, fading like mist in the corners of the palace. They both failed to protect her when she needed it most. When she was 12, her younger brother caught a fever. They did nothing. He died in her arms. She held him and felt the world's cruelty seep into her bones. That day, she swore she would never be powerless again. By 15, she had learned to read people as easily as letters on a page. Every glance, every hesitation, every trembling hand spoke volumes. Fear, desire, loyalty, betrayal. She understood that control was never about force. It was about understanding the hearts of others and knowing exactly how to bend them. And then she discovered the monks. Silent men of faith, bound by vows yet still human. Temptation lingered in their eyes, hidden, forbidden. She exploited it, slowly, carefully, one touch, one whispered promise. They fell under her sway without realizing they were being used. Desire became her tool, obsession her weapon. She seduced their minds as much as their bodies. Every secret affair was a game she always won. Her family noticed. Her mother whispered warnings. Her father scowled, his rage barely restrained. But no one could stop her. Not her cunning, not her audacity, not her beauty, sharp as a blade. She moved through the palace like fire through dry grass, uncontainable, unpredictable, untouchable. The palace became her stage. Every ceremony, every feast, every public audience was an opportunity. She watched people's reactions with clinical precision. Courtiers whispered about her behind gilded curtains. They called her dangerous, scandalous, immoral. She let them. The more they feared her, the stronger she became. Their whispers were fuel, feeding the legend that had begun to grow around her. But she was lonely. Nights were worse than the day. Candlelight flickered against the marble floors. Shadows danced on the walls. Faces of lovers, allies, enemies, flitting, taunting. Men who had pledged devotion now feared her. Women who smiled in her presence plotted revenge. The closer she got to power, the more isolated she became. She was learning a truth all rulers learn eventually. Every advantage carries risk. Every manipulation invites retaliation. Every seduction can become a trap. Despite the dangers, she thrived. She learned quickly. Power and desire are currencies, and she spent them wisely. Allies became instruments, lovers became pawns, fear became armor. Even her own family, fractured and flawed, was part of the chessboard she manipulated. Every smile, every favor, every act of obedience or defiance was logged in her mind, catalogued for future use. By 18, she was no longer simply a daughter of noble blood. She was a queen in the shadows, a force behind the throne. Her beauty, her cunning, her audacity, every trait combined into a weapon of psychological warfare. The empire whispered her name, both in awe and fear. Rumors of her liaisons with monks, her ruthless decisions, her brilliance at manipulation, traveled faster than any decree. She let the whispers spread. The palace became intoxicated by the thrill of her presence, uncertain if she was ally or predator. Yet, for all her control, cracks began to show. Allies grew envious, men faltered, and secrets threatened to explode. Every action had consequences. Every seduction, every decision, every carefully concealed desire carried a risk. And she understood it. Every single day. By the end of her 18th year, she had realized something terrifying. The closer you get to controlling everyone, the more vulnerable you become to those same forces. Desire, fear, loyalty, betrayal, they could be wielded by her, but they could also turn against her. And she was ready to play that dangerous game anyway. She had survived death, despair, and betrayal, and she would survive this too. She was Theodora, Empress in spirit, even if not yet crowned, and the world would remember her, for better or worse. By the time she fully claimed her place in the imperial palace, the city itself had begun to fear and admire her in equal measure. The same woman who once moved like a shadow through silent corridors now strode openly through marble halls, every step measured, every glance a declaration of power. She had learned that authority was not only exercised through decrees and armies. It was a psychological game, a war fought in whispers, silences, and the smallest betrayals. Her personal relationships, always intertwined with strategy, became more audacious. The monks, who once observed her as an intelligent student, now found themselves entangled in a web of desire and influence. She seduced not merely bodies, but minds, demonstrating a subtle genius in understanding human weakness. Each connection was a calculated risk, a test of loyalty and secrecy, and with every victory, her aura of untouchable brilliance grew. Yet even as she captivated others, she remained fundamentally alone, a queen whose most intimate moments were both a shield and a weapon. Family, when it intersected with power, proved a double-edged sword. Her father, now aging, oscillated between pride and fear. He saw the cunning in her maneuvers but failed to recognize the cost they extracted from her soul. Her mother's health had further declined, leaving her daughter increasingly burdened with emotional labor and silent oversight. Even minor family obligations became arenas of tension. Loyalty had limits, and the empire offered no sanctuary from those who sought to manipulate or control her. She learned to navigate these delicate balances, keeping appearances while silently calculating the repercussions of every choice. Her lifestyle reflected both opulence and strategy. Balls, feasts, and public ceremonies were not mere indulgences. They were stages upon which she observed human nature in its rawest form. Courtiers' whispers, the nervous flick of an eye, the hesitation in a handshake. All were data points she collected with meticulous care. Nights in candle-lit chambers were not just for pleasure, but for study. Monks, nobles, generals, and even rival women of the court became players in her intricate chessboard of influence. Every encounter, every secret shared, served to fortify her dominance or expose vulnerabilities she could exploit. Yet, beneath the veneer of control, tension simmered. Her relationships with men of faith were as perilous as they were intoxicating. Desire, after all, is never fully predictable. And in the monastic world, temptation was both forbidden and combustible. Rumors began to surface, quiet, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Whispers of the empress who entangled monks in clandestine affairs circulated, reaching the ears of enemies eager to exploit scandal for political gain. She responded not with fear, but with precision, using misdirection and the empire's fascination with her to her advantage. Yet even her cleverness could not erase the growing risk. Every secret, every intimate liaison, was a potential dagger poised above her. Her influence extended beyond the bedroom and palace walls. Political allies recognized her as a strategist of unparalleled insight. She could sway decisions not through coercion alone, but through psychological understanding, knowing exactly which threats to amplify and which loyalties to reinforce. Soldiers, ministers, and advisors were aware that her favor carried weight. her disdain equally so. Yet this dominance came with a cost. Trust was scarce, alliances fragile, and every act of control tightened the invisible noose of scrutiny that surrounded her. Within the palace, tensions escalated as minor betrayals began to surface. Trusted allies acted out of envy, subtle manipulations threatened her authority, and rival factions whispered of her excesses. The Empress learned that power, once seized, requires constant vigilance. Even those closest to her could become instruments of undoing. Each incident, a stolen document, a misplaced message, a subtle insult, became both a test and a lesson. She refined her methods, integrating observation with manipulation, seduction with diplomacy, and cunning with subtle cruelty. Amid these political battles, her personal life remained fraught with intensity. Relationships with the monks deepened, not merely as acts of desire, but as experiments in influence. She discovered vulnerabilities in men who had sworn away their worldly pleasures, and in exploiting them, she tested the boundaries of morality and authority. Her actions were not impulsive, they were deliberate, exploring the interplay between intimacy and power, trust and betrayal. Yet, the same forces that amplified her control also planted the seeds of vulnerability, emotional entanglements that could, and eventually would, unravel her empire. Her family's reaction to these entanglements was complex. Her mother oscillated between faint disapproval and silent admiration, witnessing the blend of audacity and intelligence that defined her daughter. Her father, increasingly aware of the dangerous influence she wielded, feared both her power and her recklessness. Even as he acknowledged her strategic brilliance, he sensed that her actions, particularly the scandals that had begun to surface, would attract adversaries capable of destruction. For the Empress, these familial tensions became additional variables to calculate, another layer in her intricate mental architecture of control and survival. The court itself became a stage for recurring mini-climaxes. Public feasts that seemed celebratory often ended in subtle power plays, whispers revealing betrayals, accusations masked as jest, subtle challenges to her authority, and strategic alliances formed or dissolved in the flick of an eyebrow. These moments served not as mere spectacle, but as crucibles, testing her resilience, cunning, and emotional intelligence. The Empress, ever vigilant, navigated each scenario with calculated grace, turning potential threats into instruments of her dominance. Despite her mastery, the pressure of sustaining such control began to weigh on her. She experienced moments of profound isolation, evenings spent in contemplation of the life she had built and the personal costs it exacted. Desire, power, and intellect, once sources of empowerment, now became burdens she bore alone. The relationships she cultivated, though instrumental, could not replace genuine human connection. The emotional tension grew, setting the stage for choices that would increasingly blur the line between survival and self-destruction. Irony threaded through every triumph, the very tactics she used to ensure loyalty and influence. The liaisons, the psychological manipulations, the subtle provocations also left her vulnerable. Allies could betray, monks could falter, and even her family could misinterpret intentions. The seeds of downfall were planted not in brute force, but in the delicate entanglements of desire and trust, in the very qualities that made her formidable. By the end of this period, the Empress had reached the zenith of both fascination and danger. She was a figure whose beauty, intelligence, and audacity inspired devotion and envy alike. She wielded influence over the court, the clergy, and even the hearts of men who had renounced worldly pleasures. Yet, each victory was tempered by the realization that human desire is unpredictable, that loyalty is fragile, and that the shadow of betrayal loomed closer with every calculated move. The stage was set. The Empress, who had conquered hearts, manipulated power, and seduced even the cloistered, now faced the inevitable collision of her ambition with the forces she could not fully control. Every intimate secret, every political maneuver, and every psychological gamble had brought her to a point of no return. And somewhere in the palace, beyond the opulent curtains and gleaming marble floors, danger waited patiently, as inevitable as the tide. A danger born of the very brilliance and audacity that had made her unstoppable. The candle light flickered across cold marble floors, echoing the tension that had been building for years. Every whisper, every secret, every carefully orchestrated maneuver now threatened to turn against her. The Empress, who had once moved like a phantom of control through the corridors of power, now felt the invisible threads of vulnerability tightening around her. Her very brilliance, the cunning, the beauty, the audacity, had attracted eyes that were no longer in awe, but in waiting. Her intimate connections with the monks, once her private dominion, had become a liability. Those who had pledged secrecy began to falter, weighed down by fear, jealousy, or greed. The very men whose desire had once been a source of power now whispered in shadowed corners, their voices carrying rumors of indiscretion to ears eager for scandal. She realized, too late, that desire is rarely obedient and trust is seldom absolute. The same strategies that had elevated her had also sown the seeds of her undoing. The court was a tinderbox, and the smallest spark ignited a cascade of betrayal. Allies she had carefully nurtured, some with flattery, some with intimidation, began to question their loyalties. Rivals, long patient, finally struck. They exploited every rumor, every vulnerability, every scandal she had cultivated but underestimated. The Empress, for all her intelligence, could not anticipate every betrayal. Her isolation deepened, a chilling mirror of the solitude she had always carried in her youth. The city that once admired her brilliance now watched with morbid curiosity, sensing that her downfall was imminent. Her family, once a source of early influence and subtle tension, now became another arena of exposure. Her mother, frail and silent, could offer no protection. Her father, terrified and frustrated, realized that the power he had once feared was about to consume the daughter he had helped shape. Even the small circle of confidants who had survived the shifting tides of court intrigue could not withstand the momentum of mounting conspiracies. In these moments, the Empress faced the cruelest truth of all. Her life had become a chessboard, and the pieces she had once moved with precision were turning against her. Her nights, once devoted to study, contemplation, and strategic liaisons, now became periods of vigilance and dread. Every knock on a chamber door, every shadow cast by a torch, suggested imminent betrayal. The monks, who had once been willing participants in her power games, now represented a dangerous uncertainty. One misstep, one word, one revelation could unravel the careful architecture of her life. And yet, even in these moments, she clung to her code. She would not succumb to fear, she would not flee, and she would meet the coming storm on her own terms. The tragedy, when it arrived, was both swift and inevitable. In a private chamber, betrayed by a trusted aide who had been swayed by whispers of scandal, she was ambushed. The act was brutal, surgical in its efficiency, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined her courtly maneuvers. Those who executed it knew her habits, her secrets, her vulnerabilities. The same qualities that had allowed her to manipulate desire, intellect, and loyalty became the instruments of her demise. The palace, which had once resonated with her commanding presence, fell silent, save for the echo of her final struggle. Yet even in death, she left an indelible mark. The empire mourned not only the loss of a ruler, but the enigma she embodied. Chroniclers would write of her beauty, her intellect, and her audacity. They would speculate about the monks she had seduced, the allies she had outmaneuvered, and the rivals who had orchestrated her fall. But no historian could capture the full spectrum of her existence, the loneliness that shaped her choices, the grief that forged her strength, and the complex interplay of desire and ambition that defined her life. The irony was cruel. The empress who had used intimacy as power, who had bent hearts to her will, fell victim not to armies or betrayal by strangers, but to the very web she had spun. The monks who had been drawn into her orbit, the family who had shaped her, and the court she had manipulated, all played roles in a conclusion that seemed both tragic and inevitable. Her death was not the result of a single act, but the culmination of a lifetime of cause and effect, each decision building upon the last, each desire sowing the seeds of downfall. In the aftermath, the palace became a silent witness to what ambition and brilliance, unchecked by trust or genuine connection, can bring. Those who had survived her reign whispered of her intelligence, her audacity, and the complexity of her character. They acknowledged the genius that had made her untouchable and the vulnerability that had made her mortal. Even enemies, forced to admire her strategic mastery, understood that she had lived and died on her own terms, a ruler who had commanded desire, power, and fear, and who had paid the ultimate price for the audacity of her life. Her story became legend, a dark parable whispered through the corridors of Constantinople. She was remembered not merely as an empress who seduced monks or wielded influence, but as a woman whose life was a study in extremes, ambition and vulnerability, power and isolation, desire and downfall. Every palace shadow, every whispered secret, every act of devotion or betrayal became a testament to the delicate balance between genius and tragedy. And in the final irony, her death illuminated a truth that had governed her life from the beginning. Power is intoxicating, desire is volatile, and even the most brilliant mind cannot fully control the hearts and minds of others. The empress, who had danced through life with intellect and audacity, who had turned desire into weaponry and loyalty into leverage, now rested in silence. Her story, a cautionary echo for generations to come. She had lived fiercely, loved dangerously, and ruled ruthlessly. And yet, for all her mastery, the forces she had sought to command ultimately dictated the final act of her life. The palace walls, once vibrant with her presence, became mausoleums of ambition and desire, reminders that even those who seem untouchable are bound by the same human vulnerabilities as all who dwell in mortal flesh. In the end, the empress who had seduced monks, maneuvered allies, and captivated a city met the inevitable collision of power, desire, and consequence. Her legacy, dark and luminous, haunted the empire, not as a story of brutality, but as a testament to the fragile, complex, and ultimately tragic nature of human ambition. Those who studied her life did not merely recount her actions. They grappled with the emotional weight of choices, the paradox of brilliance and vulnerability, and the haunting reminder that even queens are mortal, and even shadows cannot escape the light.